Good Wednesday morning of the 34th week. Okay, the end of the church year, as it were. Okay, Jesus said to the crowd, again, it's Luke, and it's the 21st chapter. Jesus said to the crowd, they will seize you and persecute you. They'll hand you over to the synagogues and to prisons. They will have you led before kings and governors because of my name. It will lead to your giving testimony. Remember, you are not to prepare your defense beforehand, for I myself shall give you a wisdom in speaking, that all your adversaries will be powerless to resist or refute. You'll even be handed over by parents, brothers, relatives, friends. They'll put you and they will put some of you to death. Imagine that. You'll be hated by all because of my name, but not a hair on your head will be destroyed. By your perseverance, you'll secure your lives. The last part of that had to do with probably the Jewish converts, because the way I understand it, if you were Jewish and you became a Christian, they'd say the prayers of the dead over you. I don't know if it's still true, but it was true at that time. Conversion then wasn't just a religious matter, it was also an identifying matter. Are you a member or not? Are you a member of our family community or are you not? And it meant the difference of life and death. I may be wrong on that, but I think the so-called cost of discipleship was enormous at that time, especially if you were Jewish. And I believe Luke was writing to Jewish Christians. I'm almost positive. Not perfectly positive. Some of you know more than I do, but it's just a reflection. But I have to say the first part of that text reminds me of my passionist brothers, older brothers who served in the missions, especially. The one I remember so much was the guys I lived with in Pittsburgh, the old men who had been in China and had been imprisoned in China. They were my heroes. And they had no bitterness about them. Whenever they spoke of China, they spoke of their friends there who had been horrifically persecuted because of that. And they themselves were persecuted. They were imprisoned and all the rest. They came out looking like scarecrows. Trust me. Our Sign magazine did an article 60 or 70 years ago on them. 60, whatever it was. And it showed these men, and then one was Baz Bauer and a bunch of others, and they came out looking like scarecrows. They had been imprisoned and starved and everything else. One of the cute stories, Paul Ubinger, a little pipsqueak of a guy, but the Chinese communists would interrogate them but he had a hearing issue, like he had to have hearing aids, so he shut off the hearing aid. He couldn't hear them. They were babbling and yelling at him and everything. He just sat there. That's the story told about him. He didn't hear them. And they suffered. They're my heroes. And they suffered and never became bitter. But even remembering, I think, that because of their preaching of the gospel and the conversions of those Chinese probably were murdered because of their Christian faith. I thought of the analogy for myself if my friends from St. Timothy's, 50 years worth, St. Tim's, St. Mark's now, were to die, be persecuted and die because of their friendship with me and the faith we shared, how heavy a burden that would be on me. That's the truth. And these men talk about men that were martyred in spirit. I think they call it dry martyrdom. They don't shed their blood, but they shed their heart. I wonder what it must have been like to spend 20, 30 years in China, deep in the interior, forming a community of friends and faith, and then being attacked, imprisoned, thrown out, and your friends killed. That's martyrdom on both ends, the dead and those who bear witness to the dead through their heart and suffer with them. I didn't say that right, but you get what I mean. Yeah. One of the greatest privileges of my life was to live with those missionaries. And some of them went from China, came back here, and then went to the Philippines and started our Philippine province there. The bishop that ordained me to the priesthood was a China hand. That's what they called them, China hands. Who then came back here after prison, and then was sent to. Then he went to the Philippines and started the Philippine province there and was ordained a bishop. Yeah. And then remember old Cuthbert O'Gara. Cuthbert O'Gara he spent a lot of time in prison. Cuthbert was Canadian American, okay? He was Chinese. If you lived with Cuthbert, he had not only became in his heart Chinese, he came in his appearance. You had to see Cuthbert. The man who spent years in prison and everything else. He had a gentle beauty about him, but it was also magnificent. He was a magnificent man. I don't know why we haven't put him up for canonization. I mean, he was a heroically believing man, and he had a stature. He ordained me to minor orders. The other fellow, I can't even remember his name right, sitting here right now. 2 major orders, ordination. We were blessed. We were ordained by our missionaries. And the missionaries that ordained us were the missionaries who suffered in China. I asked one of them, I can't remember which, I think it was Bas Bauer. Would you ever want to go back to China? No, it was Paul Ubinger. And he said I'd walk back if I could, meaning I'd go back any way I could get there. And I remember, I told you these stories. I remember them chatting with each other about their friends, looking at old photographs and wondering if they survived. You had to see it. You had to be a part of it to understand the kind of martyrdom they were suffering and what they went through, but also what they went through vicariously through the suffering of their friends. It's the truth. It was one of the great privileges of my life to be in the company of heroes, maybe in the company of martyrs who gave so much and asked for so little in return. I loved watching them chat with each other, especially if they looked at a photograph or something and chatted about it. Think about when you look at old photographs, 50-year-old photographs, and remember the events and the people that photograph embraces. But in their case, to know that they probably were killed, martyred, because they were friends. That's something, doesn't it? It takes a lot of faith, a profound and radical faith, to see in them martyrs for Christ. And to see in your own heart that you were called to the martyrdom of sadness. That because of you and your faith and your preaching, these people came to Christ and were crucified for it. You got to believe in Good Friday, believe me, and Easter Sunday. I learned a lot from the monks, not from their teaching, but who they were and what they were. I think I showed my friend Sarah. We were, it was in New York. Yeah, she visited me in New York. And I took her to the cemetery and I liked showing her the tombs, and some of the tombs were of these men. I wanted her to see what heroes look like. People who so believed in Christ, in the church, in humanity itself, that devoted their entire lives to it. And sometimes died for it, at least vicariously, to the death of their friends. That's the truth. Yeah. I'm privileged to have lived with these men. Great privilege.